All right. Another Friday. So I was going to talk in this session about creating a compelling case. So let me just put this up. Let's be a little bit more commercial in my thinking. There we go. So that's my Entrepreneur Switch presentation, which I'm actually going to be doing some work on this week based on some of the things that have been happening this week. So I thought I'd talk about creating a compelling presentation or a compelling argument or a compelling case, however you want to describe it. It's been an interesting week. I launched a campaign sort of midweekish where I took some content that I created. So I took basically the Entrepreneur Switch presentation because I had this, let me go back a step. I had this idea that I wanted to, because there are various things I want to do. And I think one of the philosophies that drives me is this idea of getting better at whatever it is I'm doing. So, why would somebody practice, karate for like 30 years now? Because it's not a finite thing. It's not like, oh, you do it and that's it. We're closed, we're done, it's all over. Like, there's nothing more to study, there's nothing more to learn. There's always that element of no matter what you're doing, there's a way to do it better. And there's a way to get better at doing it. So I've always had that kind of philosophy going on. And I was thinking about this with what I've been doing recently and this whole idea since the pandemic of obviously driving traffic, doing more advertising, as well as the selling side, which I've been used to for the last couple of decades. And there's all this thing of I want to get better at this. I want to get better at advertising. I want to get better at being able to put across a message in a succinct way that gets people attention, engages them, and brings them into my environment, into my world. So I've been thinking about this. And so then based on some of the research I'd done around that, I was looking at, can I take a presentation? So traditionally, in the early days of advertising, everything was very short. Like you'd have a billboard poster, you might have a line on it, and that was enough to move people to the next step. Then you had kind of the rise of not so much the infomercial, pre-infomercial. You used to have maybe 2-3 minutes max. And so there was this whole kind of hook idea. So you get people with attention with a hook and then pull them in and then move them to the next step. Then, of course, the infomercial came out. So now you had longer periods of time, 20 minutes, typically maybe 30 minutes to make a real case for whatever it was you were doing. And of course, that saw a change in how things were positioned and how things were pitched. And obviously that was a huge industry and still is to a certain extent. Then we kind of come online. And so, we've seen the whole idea of one, as the technology's evolved, to begin with, you couldn't even put up a video advert in the early days of advertising online because it just wasn't the bandwidth. Then we got to this place where you could do that, but then you could do webinars, and that was fantastic. But of course, you got to get people to a webinar. Then we've now got this situation where all these things are done to death to the point where, do they work? Yes, they work. Is it harder to get people to attend them? Absolutely. Do you need to have something which is more compelling in some way? Without a doubt. So all of this is kind of going on. So then there was this thought of, based on some research I was doing, can I take what has traditionally been a webinar and just run it as an advert and see what impact it has? So like literally change nothing about it and just run it as an advert and see what happens. Because of course, if I run something, for example, within Facebook, then because it's all in Facebook can track every aspect of it. So there's some value in that in terms of getting feedback and getting metrics. So I thought, okay, let's do that. And then last week, I also thought, well, actually, what I'll do is rather than run one presentation, I'll run two so that at least I've got something to compare with. So I sat down and deliberately created something based on a presentation I'd done at the beginning of the year for a virtual event, a one-day virtual event. And I took that presentation, amended it slightly, re-recorded it, and thought, okay, let's run this. So I had basically had two presentations, both just over 30 minutes long. And so I ran them as adverts, same audiences, and just ran them as adverts. And it's been really interesting. So in the sense of one of them is doing it extremely well, and the other one, the one that I typically run for my Entrepreneur Switch, isn't doing as well. Now, of course, that could be the audience, could be a number of factors. But based on same audience, it isn't running as well as an advert. But it got me thinking, because when I compared the presentation that's doing well, which is a slightly different topic, with the presentation that's not doing as well, topic aside, like subject matter aside, they've still got the same focus. They've still got the same fundamental hook, although it's described in a slightly different way. And it was like, okay, what else is different? And so the presentation that's working really well is kind of gets to the point much more quickly. it kind of gets into the meat of the presentation much more quickly. And so it's really grabbing people. And certainly my outcome was based on I wanted people to watch at least 25% of the presentation, of the video. Because if they're watching 25%, they're watching 8 minutes. If someone's watching something for 8 minutes, they're interested. If some people are watching it all the way through, and I'm surprised that people are, but that's fantastic. So that means it's interrupting them in the newsfeed of Facebook. So they're scrolling along. Most people use Facebook purely for entertainment, purely for kind of mindlessness. Might sound a little bit extreme, but you know, that idea of, oh, I'm taking a break, I'm resting my brain, I want to escape for a second or two. So they just scroll through Facebook. And yet some people are watching a whole 32-minute presentation. That's fantastic. Then this is where the third part comes in. So everything kind of comes together, excuse me, in the sense that I'm researching, constantly listening, and then I'm kind of pulling threads together and going, can I use that? Can I use that? Can I use that to improve things? Can I make things better? Can I make me better ultimately? So then the third thing was I went back through some presentations that other people have run over the last few months as live streams. And one caught my eye, which is the whole idea. It's a book called The 3-Minute Rule. And it's written by a guy who is an ex, or probably still potentially, a TV producer. So he was used to pitching ideas for TV shows to networks. And so he'd gone through this whole process where they'd pitch maybe 10 different ideas. One of them would turn out to be useful, would actually turn into an actual TV show. And obviously that's how they made their money. But he was finding that frustrating. So I went and bought the book. That was the other thing. And I've been going through it. And interestingly enough, it's that idea of, can I take what is essentially a 30-minute presentation and drill it down and condense it down and kind of take out the essence of it and turn it into a 3-minute presentation? And can I use that to hook people in and move them to the next step? And that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm looking at, and what it's forcing me to do is to go through my presentations and really drill down into what are the key elements. Because I always believe I start from the place of, how do people make a buying decision? Because obviously I'm looking for people to either buy me, well, multiple outcomes, buy me, buy my ideas, and then ultimately buy my products or services. So then it's like, can you narrow that down? Can you kind of suck the essence out of it and turn it into 3 minutes? And that's what I want to play with. So I put together a presentation to kind of help explain my current thinking around creating a compelling case. I'm hoping that I'm going to get more insights over these next few days, because I'm going to force myself to look at what I'm doing. And especially with this presentation, the Entrepreneur Switch, I'm going to take that and really focus on, can I turn that into a 3-minute presentation? Now, don't expect a 3-minute presentation to generate the level of sales that, say, a 60-minute presentation or a 90-minute presentation does. No doubt about it, because I know from my own experience, I know from my own tests, that 90 minutes with a live audience is really the sweet spot, in a sense of it's enough time for people to kind of go through a number of things in their head to make a decision in the moment. Whereas 3 minutes, asking somebody to make a decision on something that costs, $1,000 or $2,000 in 3 minutes, I don't think that's real. That's a real hard ask. I mean, you get the odd one or two people who've probably been thinking about something that you're offering in a similar vein, maybe for months, and they finally go, okay, let's pull the trigger. That might happen, but that's not going to be a consistent theme. But in 3 minutes, how far can I get it? How much can I do? Can I condense it down? And that's what I want to find out. So let me bring up some slides. Let me share screen window. Here we go. I just put some notes down. There we go. So a couple of things from my perspective. This is really me, I guess, going into my head and almost modeling myself in terms of when I sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a presentation, then where do I start from? So I will always start with the final outcome. Like, what do I want people to do? That's the beginning steps. And that obviously then drives your focus, and it also gets you really, I guess, telling your reticular activating system, filter out everything that isn't relevant to this outcome and filter in everything that is. So start thinking in those terms. So I will typically start with the outcome. So the outcome might be that I want a presentation. Let's say it's a $1,000 product, or let's say it's a $2,000 product. Let's keep it simple. Let's say it's a $2,000 product. So my outcome might be that I want to get to a place where this presentation is consistently turning cold audience members into buyers at roughly a 20% conversion. So if I can get 20% conversion for a $2,000 product from a presentation, Solid. Fantastic. So that's my outcome. Then it's like, okay, what do I want to do then? Now, the first thing is I know that the whole essence of influence is for me to be able to plant pictures in people's minds. So you're effectively, I've mentioned this before, but I think of it as a bridge. It's like people are on one side of the bridge where they have potentially no real interest and certainly no thought about buying anything, no idea who I am. So there's obviously an element of skepticism as well. And I want to get them across the bridge to that place where they are a fan, they trust me, they feel they know me, they absolutely believe that I can help them get a result that they want. And also they're ready to kind of go, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to pull the trigger, I'm going to buy. And that's where I want to get them to. So I know that to do that, there's two key things going on. One is I need them to be able to justify to themselves why they're making the decision, why they're making a decision to buy. And that works on two levels. One is logic. So what's the logical argument that I need to lay out for them? And the second is emotional. What's the emotional argument I need to lay out for them? So there's always those two key elements, two key themes running through everything. And that's where I always start. It's like, what's the logical element? In other words, what are the steps? So if I say this is step one and this is step two, in other words, a bit like the recipe for a cake. If I say, okay, look, I want to have chocolate cake, then logically, what do I need to bring together to be able to create a chocolate cake? So there's going to be ingredients. So the same way, my logical argument is, what are those key ingredients? So obviously with the chocolate cake, you're going to need chocolate, you're going to need cocoa powder, you're going to need eggs, you're potentially going to need some milk, might need a little bit of cream. So there's all these different elements that you need to put together. So you need to be able to lay that out logically. Because if you put together a presentation and you say, okay, logically there's step one, step two, step three, step four, step five, step six, and somebody looks at it and goes, well, none of that makes sense. Why do you need step one? Why do you need step two? How do they tie together? That doesn't make, like, in my head, why do you need any of those? Or if they look at it and go, well, I need step one, I need step two, and I need step three, but surely that's not enough. Surely there needs to be more steps to get to the end result. And so if in their head, they can't see the connection between your steps and them getting the outcome they want, then immediately you lose credibility because they're going, that doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense to them, you've lost them. So it's no longer a compelling case because they look at it and go, well, that's a broken recipe. That's a recipe for chocolate cake without chocolate in it, without cocoa in it. It's like, it's not going to work. So ultimately in their head, logically, they'll be going, it doesn't work. So you need to start with that logical argument. You need to lay out the steps logically. If you want to get this outcome and you're starting from this place, logically, what are the steps along the way? So you got to start there. And I will literally, I'll get my journal and I'll just start writing down those logical steps. And they are at this point, they're just like, what do I need in here? What are the steps to do this? And then I'll look at it. I'll run my eye across it. I'll go, okay, if I take step one and step two, step three, step four, will I get the result? And if I go, no, there's something missing, then it's like, okay, well, what's missing? And then I'll think about that. And if I don't have an answer straight away, because most of the time when I write a presentation, I'm modeling results that I've achieved. So fundamentally, I know how to get the result because I've done it. So I'm really going in my head and pulling out what are the elements that I did. What did I do? So I'm modeling myself. I'm trying to pull out the recipe from myself that's in my unconscious mind and bring it into my conscious awareness. And that's what I'm doing. So those are logical steps. If I was putting together a presentation, which I have done more recently for someone else's stuff, then it's not necessarily so much about, is it a result I've achieved? Like they might have achieved a result which I've done, but they've done it a very different way. Or they might have achieved a result that I haven't actually achieved if it's completely different. Like somebody who's got six-pack abs. I've never had six-pack abs. I've been slim. I've been very happy with my weight and my strength and my physique, but I've never actually had six-pack abs that, like you see on the cover of a magazine with these six-pack ab model guys where they take these pictures and I don't know how much they're touched up. I don't know how much training they do or what they do preparation-wise. They might not drink water for a month for all I know in order to take one picture. I don't know. But I've never been that guy. Does that make sense? So if I was helping somebody put together a presentation to absolutely have six-pack abs that you could see, like literally, even if you had a T-shirt on, you could still see them, like really defined, then I'd need to dig into their head to pull out those steps to understand how they've achieved that result. So there's always that element of, do I know the steps? If not, I need to find someone who does so I can pull them out. So first of all, that's what I do. So now I've got a logical steps. It's like step one, and I might have a ridiculous number of steps, in which case, of course, then I start organizing it, because then my other guiding principle is to create a compelling argument. The last thing you want to do is confuse anybody. If you give people too many steps, you will lose them. They will get confused. Guaranteed. The more steps there are, the more possibility for confusion. I then go back to some old research. This idea of number of chunks of information that people can hold in their head at a given time is anywhere between, like it's called the magic number 7. So the original research said the magic number 7, most people can hold 7 chunks of information in their mind quite easily. Now, the reality is somebody under stress, that drops massively from 7, potentially down to 1. Some people might be able to hold 9, but I kind of err on the side of, well, let's keep it simpler. So for me, 5 steps maximum. Most of my presentations, I'll organize around 3 major steps. So I reduce it even further. So if I've got a bunch of steps and said, okay, look, here's my recipe for chocolate cake, and it's got, 15 different ingredients in it. Then, of course, there's all the other elements in terms of you need an oven, you need to put it in the oven and all this sort of stuff. Then I'll go, okay, let's reorganize that. So what I'll then do is I will attempt to say, okay, I want to organize this into no more than 5 steps. So if I was going to organize, so in other words, all these elements, these ingredients, they're subsets of a bigger step. So that's called chunking. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking smaller steps and chunking up into one bigger step, so I can say this bigger step contains all these smaller steps. Makes it much easier. So I'll do that. So now I've got the logic side of it. I've got the steps laid out, and I've then got an idea of chunking. So I'm going to chunk this into 3 to 5 steps. Let's say 5 steps. So I go, okay, what would my 5 steps be? That's my first question. And then I start playing around with everything I've written down and start looking to organize it into 5 steps. And once I'm comfortable with that, I go, great, I've got it. So I've got 5 big steps, like 5 big stepping stones across the river to bridge the gap across the river. And I go, good, that's my logic. Then, now I've got to look at it in terms of, okay, people don't buy on logic alone. They buy more on emotion. So typically people will buy with emotion, but they'll justify with logic. So now I've got to make a compelling emotional argument. So now it's a similar idea. So it's the same concept, but I look at it in terms of, okay, what's the bridge between where they are and where they want to get to? So let's say where they are, they're not happy with their results. So now they're in a place where they're, let's say, frustrated. So I'll say, okay, so I'll draw a little diagram. On one side, I'll put frustrated. And on the other side, it's like, okay, when they hit that goal, how are they going to feel? So if they went from overweight to perfect shape, how would they feel when they look in the mirror? If they went from struggling to get clients to having a constant stream of clients, never having to worry about it ever again in their life, they could switch it on and off at demand, how would they feel? Would they feel liberated? Would they feel free? Would they feel excited? Would they feel joyous? Would they feel like they've achieved something? Would they feel like a rock star? It's like, so I'll write all these down. So then you got the same idea as the ingredients to the cake. So you don't go from no cake to cake in one step. In the same way, you don't typically go from frustrated to feeling like, wow, my life's on fire, this is amazing, in one step. So then you're kind of breaking it down, saying, okay, what are the emotions you might go through to go from frustration to feeling amazing? So now I'll break that down again as well into maybe 3 to 5 steps. Typically, I want to look at it in terms of what are the logic steps. I've got 5 logic steps, then I'll try and break it down into 5 emotional steps. So from frustration, I might go from frustration to what would break frustration, what would interrupt frustration. So it might go from frustration to curiosity. So that might be my first stepping stone in terms of emotion. So I want people to go from they arrive on the presentation. Ideally, I'd like them to arrive curious, but I won't assume that, because I know that within the compelling presentation, one of the first things I'm going to do is remind them of that frustration deliberately, because I want to stir it up a little bit, because I want to get them emotionally engaged. So I might stir up the problem a little bit to get them a little bit frustrated, or tell a story that empathizes with their frustration to stir that up. But then from there, it's like, okay, the next step is I want curiosity. So how do I move them from frustration to curiosity? And that's what I'm looking at. Then from curiosity, it's like I want to start moving them towards feeling amazing. So what would you go from curiosity to maybe intriguing, or a sense of actually this could work, which is hope. So we might look at it in terms of, okay, compelling emotional argument is I want to move them from frustration to curiosity to hope. So if I can get them to hope, then the next thing that's going to happen is their desire for what I'm offering is going to start to grow. So there's a feeling of desire, like I want this, and I want that in the mix as well. So I'm looking at it in those terms. So how do I build desire? I build desire by breaking down what are the emotions they need to go through based on where I think they're starting from, and based on the idea that I do want them a little bit frustrated to begin with, to get them to that place where the desire is growing. So if I go frustration, curiosity, hope, now we're building desire. Does that make sense? So I'm doing all of that. Now, the way I want to do that is obviously in the presentation itself. It's like, what are the key elements? What are the key pieces of information I need to share with them? So then there's like, what are the insights I need to give them? So in other words, I come back to the steps. What's the step? And how is the step? So I need to relate the step to their goal, to their final outcome. So then it's therefore, why does this work? Why does this step work? Why is it necessary? Why is it important? How will it help them? So I'm always asking those kind of questions. And I'm looking to pull out the kind of the essence, the insight, the core insight that lets somebody know, wow, that's why I need this. So, go back to the chocolate cake idea. You need cocoa in your recipe. If you've got no cocoa, it's not going to taste of chocolate at all. So I might say to them, okay, we need cocoa. And then explain, like the key insight is you need cocoa to flavor the cake. And you need to get the right amount of cocoa, otherwise the cake will be too bitter. Or we need to put in the right amount of cocoa. And in a moment, I'm going to share with you another ingredient we put in to give the cocoa not a bitterness, to take the bitterness out and leave it like a smooth taste, a creamy taste. So now I'm building the case for having cocoa. So people are going, oh, right, I need cocoa in the cake. That makes sense. And so again, they're going, now, of course, they've gone from curiosity to, oh, I know I need that. That's hope. So we're moving them forwards all the time. Then, of course, in my head, it's like, okay, if I want to get across that insight, cocoa is required for flavor, then how do I get that across? Now, we're back to the most powerful way to do that is to tell a story. End game is always the same. I want to plant a picture. So I want them to form a picture in their mind of seeing the cocoa in the cake to give it the taste. That's the insight. Cocoa cake taste. Cocoa gives it taste. So I want them to have that insight, and I want them to have an emotional response to that. So the picture I want to plant is ideally, and I'm just saying this off the top of my head, the ideal scenario is if I'm talking about the cocoa flavor in the cake, I want them to imagine themselves biting into a piece of cake and tasting the flavor. That's what I want. Because if they can taste it, even imagine, like if I said to you right now, look, I've got a lemon. Or if I said to you, imagine you've got a lemon in your hand. Imagine you've got your right hand, lift your right hand up, and you've got a lemon in it. Right, so just if you're left-handed, if you're right-handed, move that lemon to your left hand. If you're left-handed, keep it in your right hand. So you got it in the right hand. You got it in which hand is necessary. So pick up the knife. So if you're right-handed, pick up the knife with your right hand. Make sure the lemon's in your left hand. So now we've planted a series of pictures already. Knife in a right hand, lemon in the left hand. Okay, very carefully, because I don't want you to cut your hand, cut the lemon. So now you've sliced the lemon all the way through. Cut it all the way through, so you've got two pieces of lemon. So it falls open in your left hand. Okay, put one piece down, take the other piece, put the knife down, put it in your right hand, and just bring it up to your arm, bite into the lemon, like really bite right into the flesh of the lemon. Feel the juice start to come into your mouth. How does it taste? Do you have a reaction? If you've done it, absolutely, you have a reaction. The point is, you've just imagined it. It wasn't real. The lemon's not real. It doesn't exist, but you had a reaction to it based on imagining it. So in other words, based on the picture that's planted in your head. So I want them, if I was wanting to get cocoa flavor cake, then I want them to, I want to plan a picture where they are biting into the cake. They're taking a taste of it. They're tasting the chocolate flavor. That would fire off the emotion. And it would literally reinforce the belief that you need cocoa in the ingredients to give it flavor. That makes sense? That's straight in there. So I'm thinking of it in terms of those planting those pictures that are going to fire off those emotions, that are going to cause someone to have a reaction that literally solidifies the belief that I want them to have. So in this case, I want them to know and believe cocoa gives your chocolate cake flavor. gives it the chocolate taste. And that's how I would do it. So then, okay, the next one is, well, how do I deliver that picture? And of course, then we come back to storytelling. The best way to deliver a picture is a story because people lower their resistance to it. So if I can bring in a short story, even if it's a 30-second story or even a 10-second story, it doesn't have to be a long-winded thing. But if it's a short story, and more often than not, it's like, okay, first time I ever made a cake. So if I wanted to kind of get across this idea of needing cocoa, first time I ever made a cake, got all the ingredients, mixed them all together, put them in the oven, went off, came back an hour later, took the cake out. It looked great. It looked absolutely great. It wasn't quite the right color I was expecting, but it looked great. Anyway, I cut a slice. I thought, this seems a little bit, doesn't look as dark as I expected to, but never mind. Bit into it, it was disgusting. There was no chocolate flavor whatsoever. Then I realized I'd left out the cocoa powder. So that's a way of telling a story. So I could literally put myself in the situation of biting into the cake. And then, of course, very quickly say, so I did it, I threw that out, started again. This time I made absolutely sure I put the cocoa powder in it, mixed everything again, stuck it in the oven, went away, came back an hour later, opened it. Cake looked fantastic. You could see the steam rising off it. It was amazing. When I cut into it, more steam rising up through it, and you could smell it this time. I could smell the chocolate in the cake. Like, wow, this is a big clue. They've got it right this time. I took a big slice of that cake, big slab. I was serious. Like, by this point, like, I've waited 2 hours. I was seriously hungry. I wanted cake. Sliced into it, grabbed a big slice, literally rammed it into my mouth. I mean, it really gave my teeth. I didn't even give them a chance to bite into it properly. Straight in. And then you get the chocolate. It was like, wow, it just immediately, like my nose, my mouth, every little thing on my tongue that tastes was tasting chocolate. Wow. Did you start to get a sense of the chocolate in the cake? It's that idea. So it's telling a story. Now, I've told the story in first person, as in it was me eating the cake, but it still works because it still plants the same picture in their mind that I want them to have. That's the compelling aspect. So what are the steps? I go with that. The second layer, or the third layer, so we've got the logic case, steps. We've got the emotional case, steps. We've got how am I going to deliver the picture, story, so that it fires off the emotion. I've got that in there. And then I've got, okay, what gets in the way? In other words, what are some of their own beliefs or some of their own experiences from the past that they believe will limit their ability to do this? Like, one of the key elements when it comes to creating a compelling case where you want somebody to not just like to get somebody to buy into your credibility, fairly straightforward. You know, you tell a story about having discovered something and having achieved a certain result. Tell that well, most people have got it. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to buy. That just means they now trust that you could actually deliver a result, or that trust that you could get the result. They need to believe that they can get the result. More importantly, they need to believe they can get the result with your help. So in order to do that, we need to kind of think about what are the things that they might currently believe that would stop them from getting the result. And so we need to help them believe that they can do this. Now, some of the stuff is like, it's just simple objection handling. Like, they might not believe they have the money, they might not believe they have the time. Those are the basics. But you also want to dig into it in terms of, okay, what is it that could cause them to think, okay, I couldn't do this, or I couldn't do this even with your help. So then you're into, like, is it too complex? Which is why we go back to keep it to no more than 5 steps. You might come back to, well, that's actually not the result I want. So we narrowed it down. Or they might start thinking, well, your situation and where you're starting from isn't exactly where I started from. So it's like, well, can I give examples of how this works for other people, unlike me, who maybe started from slightly different positions? One of the ways I try to overcome that, because then my next step, of course, is if I know what's getting in the way, if I know what potentially might limit them, then it's like, okay, how do I overcome that? How do I reframe that? How do I basically share something which causes them to go, actually, that's not a problem anymore? Like, I want to eliminate all those problems from their mind. So they go, actually, this will work. This will work for me. This will work for me because of your help. I want to do this. That's where I want to get them to. So if I think of all the things that might get in the way, so as an example, if we're talking chocolate cake, they might say, well, you know, I've made cakes in the past. They all came out terrible. They all came out flat. None of them ever rose. So I need to share that. I need to kind of bring that in. So I can either do that through my own experience, or I can do that by sharing, you know, testimonial type stories or case study type stories where you talk about someone else who is more like them or had a similar problem to them. Like, for example, you know, when Jenny first came to talk to me about making cakes, She'd tried a few on her own in the past. They'd all flopped. They literally, what she told me when they came out of the oven, she said whether they were burnt to a crisp and she got it wrong, or even if they weren't burnt to a crisp, the one thing they all had in common was they were all inverted. Like they were all like not just flat, they were literally inverted. She could not understand what she was doing wrong. She couldn't understand why they always came out completely flat. Sometimes they taste okay. Sometimes they just taste really bad. None of them ever tasted great. And she wanted to know, how do I get it to look right so it rises? And how do I get it to taste great? So I don't know if you've had that kind of situation. And then, so now I'm, again, pre-framing and empathizing with that challenge. And then, of course, I then need to tell a story. Okay, here's what we did, and here's how we changed it. So it's the same idea. So you're kind of going through it layer by layer. Yes, this takes some thought. And what you tend to have is you have a situation where you kind of collect loads of ideas and loads of things. Like I'll collect loads of steps. I'll collect loads of thoughts about the emotions I wanted to go through. I'll collect loads of stories of things that I could use and tell to kind of get ideas across to them, or to share the steps or share the key emotions that I want them to feel. I'll think about what could get in the way, and I'll come up with stories to empathize with that. I'll come up with stories to reframe that. So I'll do all of that. And then, of course, then you got to narrow it down, because typically it's much better to have too much material and then narrow it down than it is to have too little material. Because too little material means that you don't get to a place where you made enough of a compelling argument that someone goes, yes, this is right for me. So it's better to start with too much, and then you start effectively pruning. You're pulling things out. You want to get down to the core essence of what exactly is it that's going to work. Now, as I say, for me, when I first started doing presentations live, some of my presentations were 2.5 hours long. And there was nothing wrong with it. It's not like you can be too long, certainly not in a live audience, because people will stay. As long as they're interested, they'll stay. As long as it's not boring, I should say, they'll stay. But it wasn't an element of, well, do I need 2.5 hours to get this across? Did 2.5 hours make a difference in terms of conversions than 1.5 hours? No, it didn't. So it's like, can I get this down more and more and more? And I actually did for a while go, okay, can I get this down from 90 minutes to 60 minutes and still get the same impact? So I tested that. And initially, it was erratic. It was mixed. As in, there were presentations that worked, presentations that didn't work as well. I didn't get the same consistency of results, and I didn't get the same consistency of higher conversions as I did with 90 minutes. That's why I ended up at this place of, well, 90 minutes is a perfect length. Obviously, online, that doesn't always work. You sometimes need a little bit more to kind of pull it down. But what I have realized is, online, you can do more in advance. So you can have somebody, like the campaign I'm running at the moment. If somebody's watching 8-10 minutes of a presentation, even better. If they're watching the whole 30-odd minute of a presentation in the middle of their Facebook news feed, then that's pretty cool. If I go from that and then they come on a web class, which is 60 minutes, chance of conversions are going to go up. But that's my prediction. They will go up. I mean, obviously, I'll test this and find out for real. But based on everything I know, they're going to go up. If I get someone who's watched a presentation for at least 8 minutes, if somebody's definitely watched it for 30 minutes, then they come on a presentation where I'm actually then making an offer at the end of it, chances of that offer being successful are very high. So all of those elements come into it. I lay them all out. And then I'll come back and like refine it and drill it down. Now, as I said, I'm going through this book at the moment, the 3-minute rule, which again in my head, see, straight away in my head, I'm thinking about all the things where what he's saying wouldn't necessarily directly relate, because his experience is pitching TV shows to producers. So he's got 3 minutes to kind of get across enough of a desire for a TV company, a network company, to then say, yes, we want to run the show. How many episodes can we do? Blah, 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 blah. So I'm not sure if that's exactly the same as getting someone to say yes to, a coaching program or an information product. And obviously there's similarities, but could you get someone to purchase in 3 minutes? Not sure it's the same equivalence, because typically with a broadcast, a TV network, they're not really so much thinking, can we afford to do this? Because they know they can make money from something that's successful. So slightly different in that respect. But I'm keen to kind of drill into it, dig into it, and really pull out the essence of what it is I do. So I'm looking at it as a tool to help me refine and improve what I do so that I can run more video adverts. So it may be that I will test running a really concise 3-minute one, or a combination of a 30-minute and a couple of 3 minutes, then a webinar presentation, or a couple of 3 minutes, a 30 minutes, then later a 3-minute with the offer in it. Because if somebody's watched, let's say, top of funnel 2 or 3 3-minute videos, which really contain the essence of everything, so they buy into me, they buy into being a fan, then they watch a 30-minute presentation, which is top of funnel, middle of funnel, no offer at all, just pure value, so massive credibility, more fan base being built, and then they see an offer from me in a 3-minute video, that could work incredibly well. But if they see the offer or come on a 60-minute webinar presentation with an offer at the end, I'm convinced that'll work really well. That's what I'm looking at doing. But all of that relies on your ability to create a compelling presentation. If it isn't compelling, if it isn't working, if it doesn't engage them, none of it matters. You're never going to get to the offer. They're never going to stay long enough. If they get bored, even if they see something else of yours in the newsfeed, they're unlikely to watch it. It's a bit like, I talked about Robert Downey Jr. and the sort of Iron Man idea. They brought out the Iron Man movies, the Avenger movies. People kept going back to them. Why? Because they were engaged in the first one. They loved it. If they'd have been absolutely bored, chances are they wouldn't have given the second one a look. But if they were engaged and they're loving it, they're like, oh, wow, this was great. This was really entertaining. It was really good. It drew me in. I want to go back and watch more. I want to have to experience those same feelings. I want to have a similar experience of having a great time, of feeling good for whatever the reasons might be, whether they want to escape for a while, whether they just want to share something with somebody and have something to talk about, whatever they are, but they're drawn in. So that's what I'm thinking. But it all comes down to your ability to create a compelling case. So I'm going to say, if you got any questions about this, leave them below. I'm also, as you know, I'm working on launching a new coaching program where I'm going to be talking about helping coaches and therapists build a fan base so they can then use that to then develop a compelling case to share with that fan base, obviously to promote more of their products and services. So if you'd like to know more about that, then click this link or copy this link. Actually, shall I copy it? I can make it a comment. I can make it a chat. Is that right? Hold on a second. Let me copy and do this. No. Trying to edit it and copy it. It's taking too long. Here we go. Let's do that. Okay. Let's come back to here. Let's put this in here. All right. So you can basically, I can show that as a comment now. Yeah. So if you follow that, then that will take you to my booking page. Actually, first of all, it'll prompt you for a deposit. So what I'm doing is with this is there is a $97 commitment deposit. $97 completely refundable. You can have it back as soon as we talk. The only reason for it is it allows me to kind of get rid of tire kickers and people who are not really that serious or interested in their business, who just want to have a chat for whatever reason. It's like, great. And I want to help people who are genuinely want to be helped and genuinely want to make a difference and genuinely want to achieve bigger results. So if you follow that link, then that will allow you to book a session with me and we can have a chat. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. Any questions you got about creating a compelling case, put them below. What I'll do is if there's enough of an interest, then I will do more on this and I'll break it into a proper presentation because I've got a huge amount of material over the years that I've collected that have allowed me to do all of this and to do it well. So I'll bring that in. And also, as I dig into this whole 3-minute idea, then obviously I'm going to gain insights for me personally. So I'm going to come and share those with you as well. And I'll share the results of those as I start putting them out on YouTube and Facebook as adverts and sort of see the results that we get from it. All right. I'm going to sign off for now. Have a great weekend as always. If you're watching this in the replay, which most people do, then let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what your business is. Let me know what you'd like to achieve over the next 12 months if you're feeling kind of talkative. And ideally, if you're feeling up for it, book a time slot with me and we can have a chat further. All right, take it easy. See you next time.